When I first started in 2012, we had overcrowding in the prisons. There was 160,000 people locked up in our prison system. And when I started visiting prisons all over California, the one thing that almost everyone said why they were there is something that happened when they were in their youth. Some of the trauma that I heard about, even I couldn't have withstood, whether it's rapes, whether it's drug addiction in the home, whether it's no father, whether it's gang involvement, whether it's all the ills, poverty, all the ills, mental health problems, all the ills of society were foisted on a group of people who really couldn't handle it. So if you're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, as opposed to being 50 or 60 years old, what do you think will happen to that young person? And so as I talked to all these people that were incarcerated, they talked about if they had had an alternative, if they had someplace else to go instead of what was going on in the street, the outcomes would have been a lot better, and they would not be in the situation they're in now. Some of them committed some of the most heinous crimes imaginable, but there were some of the most heinous crimes committed on them imaginable.
We have to teach them the skills that they need, and I always talk about it as if it's a toolkit, a tool chest. If you only have a hammer, every single thing is going to look like a nail. They need the right tools to deal with the right situation.
These youth have untapped potential oftentimes, and all they need is to have investment in them, to teach them about their family's story, who they are, where they are in relevance to the universe, and where they can go to the future.
What I learned with the prison system when I started to get more rehabilitation programs in 2012, 10 years later, we don't have 160,000 people locked up. It's now down to 96,000. That means they did not recidivate. That means they did not get out and do the crime or a new crime again. That they had figured out what they could do to reacclimate themselves in society. What if we, at the beginning, before it even started, before they start to get into the school to prison pipeline, what if we started to close that pipeline until we stop it and clog it up with programs? You are my clogging instrument.
If we don't have to deal with these misdemeanor minor crimes, we can focus on the more serious crimes, and we would rather have a juvenile go through some kind of an assistance program, receive the help, rather than have to go back and arrest him and see them again. So we're very happy to see that a lot of these juveniles that go through the programs that wouldn't have to see again.
In our community, restorative justice, restorative practice is a way where we can work to hold the youth accountable, but also be accountable to that youth. Because if the youth is doing some harm, they are learning that from the community. So how can we also, as adults, be accountable?
Since 2012, when we reduced the amount of people who are in prison, we're now going to close 10 prisons by the time I leave in 2 years. This is a savings annually of $230 million a year. That's not me asking for additional money. This is the money I save taxpayers. And what I'm gonna do is to make sure they don't grab it and put it to other things, but they reinvest it back into our communities. You're not just helping one kid, one person, or one community. You're helping the entire state by doing what you're doing.
43% of all funding goes to corrections. We need to change the landscape. And that's what we're all doing today. We're changing the landscape for the benefit of youth who do not need to be incarcerated. Whatever you want to categorize them, whether it's trauma-informed, evidence-based, or restorative justice, it's well needed to this whole community of California.
These kids love outdoors. We live in the Sierra Nevada mountains. That's our ancestral land. There's so much things we can be doing with our youth. And I created a sports culture and outdoor expedition program. And from there, it just pretty much is like a wildfire. Kids love being outdoors, fishing, hiking, and we work with the language, cultural department, education, recreation, so we all bridge that gap together to bring our youth. And when it was grant funded, we always got a lot more youth. Now we have waiting list.
We're working with human beings, and there's a lot that goes into just being a human. There's a lot that goes into just being a young person. And really, you know, I think with the pandemic, it highlighted that, you know, folks were losing their jobs. Folks were experiencing losing their homes. They were experiencing needing food. And so when we start to think about all of that, and that was just, well, we're still in the pandemic, but you know, that was like this period of time, but we have folks that are going through that constantly. And so when we're doing these programs, it's important for us to take that in mind, especially when we're thinking about, okay, well, we need to hit these numbers. It's not just about numbers.
Right now, when you say CDCR, it's California Corrections and Rehabilitation, but it's big C on corrections, little r for rehabilitation. We spend 43% of our budget on corrections and like 4% on rehabilitation. Think about that mindset. We've got to change that mindset. And if we change that mindset, if you change that mindset, then we will be better off.